Have you ever reached the very end of your day? You sit down on the edge of your bed in the dark and you just feel entirely, completely drained.
Oh, absolutely. That heavy feeling.
Right, but I don't mean the good kind of drain. I'm not talking about that satisfying physical exhaustion that you get from, say, building something with your hands or going for a really long run.
Or finishing a grueling shift of hard physical labor.
Exactly. I'm talking about that sheer, overwhelming exhaustion of the mind,
Yeah.
that deep fragmentation of your attention.
Where you feel like you haven't actually accomplished anything tangible.
Yeah. Yet you feel like you've been pulled in 1,000 different directions. Pulled by endless notifications, pointless online arguments, group chats.
Just the absolute relentless noise of modern life.
We are talking directly to you today because if you've ever sat on the edge of your bed and felt that specific hollow kind of exhaustion, you are definitely not alone in this.
Not even close to alone.
We live in an environment, like an entire global digital ecosystem, that has relentlessly trained us to equate being seen with being valuable.
Right.
It's a system literally designed to keep our minds constantly on edge, constantly reacting to the next stimulus, but rarely, if ever, actually reflecting on who we are.
And that distinction right there, the gap between reacting and reflecting, is the exact dividing line between a life of constant chaos and a life of actual clarity.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Because when you are perpetually in reaction mode, which, let's be honest, most of us are today,
Oh, for sure.
your brain isn't thriving. It's just fielding incoming threats and stimuli. You're surviving the day, but you certainly aren't growing. You're really just managing the noise.
Which is exactly why we are stepping back from all that noise today.
Yes.
The structure of our overview today is designed as a focused discussion on the advice of Plato, Aristotle, and Jung, specifically regarding self-reflection and building an internal identity.
A really powerful synthesis.
It is. We want to take a profound structural look at how true self-reflection and the construction of an absolutely unshakable internal identity actually happen. And, to do this, we're not looking at some modern life hack.
No productivity apps.
Oh, right, no apps. We are going to look at this incredible synthesis of ancient Stoic philosophy and modern psychology.
Focusing on three absolute titans of human thought.
Plato, Aristotle, and Carl Jung. We're going to explore how their blueprints for self-mastery align perfectly with what we now know about human biology.
And spoiler alert for the rest of this conversation. Building that unshakable identity happens in complete silence.
Just a truly fascinating intersection, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, we are taking the foundational wisdom of ancient Greek philosophy, ideas that were forged thousands of years ago, and we're combining it with 20th century analytical psychology from Jung.
Right.
But the real key to our deep dive today is that we're going to view all of this through the hard lens of modern neuroscience.
Because the alignment between these vastly different eras of human thought, it isn't just a coincidence.
No, not at all. It points to a fundamental truth about our human wiring.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to make sure we set the right foundation before we get into the heavy lifting here.
Sure.
I want to be totally clear to you, listening, that we aren't just here to recite historical quotes so we can all feel intellectually superior.
Yeah, that's not the goal.
If we just sit here and read quotes, it's just trivia. We really need to understand the underlying mechanics.
I completely agree. The goal is to understand the why. We need to examine the actual biological and psychological gears turning behind the scenes.
Right. Like, why is this ancient wisdom about silence and self-reflection urgently, desperately relevant to your modern, overstimulated brain today?
Exactly. Why does silence actually heal the physical structures of the brain? Why does constant visibility and external validation literally erode your internal drive?
Once we break down those mechanics, this philosophy moves from being, just a nice abstract idea you read on a motivational poster,
to a highly practical daily tool for survival.
So let's start by completely redefining what silence actually is, because I think society has really done a number on our understanding of it.
Oh, definitely.
We are conditioned from a very young age to view silence as passive, or even negative. We think of it as awkward.
Like at a dinner party.
Yes. If there is a silence in a conversation at a dinner party, someone immediately rushes to fill it with small talk because the quiet feels unbearable.
We treat silence like it's just a gap, a void, just the mere absence of speech or action.
Right. That is the modern default.
Yeah.
Society treats silence as a vacuum, and human nature supposedly abhors a vacuum.
But the material we're analyzing today challenges that fundamentally. Real silence, the kind of silence that Plato and Jung advocated for, the kind that actually transforms your psychology, it is not passive at all.
Not even a little bit.
It is highly active. It is fiercely intentional. It is defined here not as an emptiness, but as the presence of depth.
The presence of depth. I love that.
Silence is the specific necessary environment where your cognitive energy actually gathers and reorganizes itself. It's an active forge.
That reframing makes me think of Plato. There's this brilliant observation from him that we're looking at today. He says, wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something.
It's so relevant.
When you think about the context of ancient Greece, right? The
Yeah.
agora, the constant public debates, it wasn't a quiet place.
No, it was incredibly loud.
So Plato was making a very sharp distinction about the anchor of your speech. Are you speaking from a place of actual substance, or are you just contributing to the noise because the silence makes you anxious?
And that modern anxiety around silence is exactly what Carl Jung was pointing to centuries later. Jung has this profound quote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes."
Who looks inside awakes.
Yeah, Jung deeply understood that looking outside, focusing your attention on the noise, the crowds, the external validation, the metrics of how other people view you, that keeps you in a state of illusion.
Like a waking dream.
Exactly. A waking dream where you are just floating along the currents of other people's opinions. You're never really in control. Waking up, achieving actual consciousness of your own life, that requires looking inside.
And you simply cannot look inside if the external noise is constantly blaring.
You can't.
But wait, when Jung says awakes, we often treat that as a purely poetic metaphor, like a spiritual awakening. But from what we're looking at in the neuroscience, looking inside actually physically changes how your brain operates, doesn't it?
What's fascinating here is the sheer biological reality of what that external noise costs you. Your attention isn't just some abstract philosophical concept. It is a physical process fueled by real biological energy.
Okay, lay this out for us.
Well, your brain runs on a limited supply of neurotransmitters. Let's look specifically at chemicals like norepinephrine and acetylcholine.
Okay, explain those to me like I'm 5. What are they actually doing in my head?
Think of neurotransmitters like a daily allowance of casino chips. You are handed this stack the moment you wake up.
All right, I have my chips.
Norepinephrine and acetylcholine are the specific high-value chips responsible for your ability to concentrate deeply, to formulate long-term plans, and to act with sustained purpose. They are the chemical fuel for high-level human thought.
Okay.
And here's the critical, terrifying point. You only get so many chips a day. They are not limitless.
So if they are finite resources, does that mean my habit of, say, checking my phone for no reason while I'm trying to work is actually robbing my brain of the physical fuel it needs to think deeply?
That is exactly what it means. Every single time you pull your phone out of your pocket at a red light, just because you can't stand 4 seconds of quiet, you throw a chip on the table.
Wow.
Every time you have 10 browser tabs open and you're just bouncing between them without committing to reading any of them, you are throwing away chips.
I feel personally attacked right now.
We all do it. But every time you get into a meaningless, ego-driven argument in a comment section just to prove a point to a stranger, you are literally bankrupting your biological battery.
So by 3 p.m., you feel exhausted, not because you did a lot of valuable work,
Yikes.
but because you spent all your highest value neurochemicals on absolute trivialities.
That is deeply sobering, because it explains that feeling of the tax of unresolved tension.
Yes, the tax of unresolved tension. You know that feeling where you have all these unprocessed thoughts just hovering in the background?
It's awful.
It's like having 20 apps running in the background of your phone, draining the battery even when the screen is dark.
Exactly like that.
When you step into intentional silence, your brain doesn't shut down. It finally gets to close all those background naps.
Yes.
But when you actively avoid silence by turning on a podcast present company accepted, of course, or playing music the second you're alone, you are avoiding yourself.
And one of the most striking points in our material today is that avoidance isn't neutral.
No, it's not.
Avoidance is highly taxing. What you avoid doesn't just evaporate. It buries itself deeper in your psyche. It becomes a background hum of anxiety.
It whispers confusion into your daily decisions.
This is the exact reason why you can sit at a desk for 8 hours, do almost nothing of real substance, and still come home completely drained.
You are carrying the cognitive load of 1,000 unprocessed thoughts and fragmented interactions.
Your brain is burning its limited fuel, just trying to manage the underlying stress of all that unresolved noise.
So, for you listening right now, I want you to honestly evaluate your own mental bandwidth. Think about your average week.
It's a tough audit to do.
It is, but how often are you losing whole days, or at least your most productive hours, to meaningless distractions? And notice that these distractions aren't usually powerful or life-altering, they are just persistent.
A Slack message here, a sensational headline there.
A lingering annoyance from an email. Before you know it, your day isn't spent, it's completely scattered.
Fragmented.
Right. Framed like this, stepping away from the noise shouldn't be viewed as missing out. You aren't isolating yourself. You are reclaiming your power.
You are physically reclaiming the cognitive fuel that the attention economy has been siphoning out of your brain all day.
Exactly. Reclaiming that energy is step one. But that naturally leads to the next massive challenge. Once you have all those casino chips back, once you have your cognitive fuel, what do you actually do with it?
Right. And that idea of reclaiming our energy makes me think of Aristotle. He had a warning that feels like it was written specifically for the Instagram and TikTok age.
Even though the man was walking around in a toga thousands of years ago.
Right. Aristotle argued that the ultimate value of life depends upon awareness and the power of contemplation, rather than upon mere survival.
It is a stunningly prescient thought. To really grasp it, we need to look at how we define survival today.
Because in Aristotle's time, or even earlier in human evolution, survival meant literal, physical safety, avoiding predators, finding food, securing shelter.
We aren't generally running from lions in the modern world.
No. Today, our survival instincts have been hijacked by social dynamics, constantly seeking attention, constantly reacting to trends, endlessly curating a digital or professional image so that others will validate us.
That is our modern psychological form of survival mode.
It triggers the exact same tribal instincts. We subconsciously feel that if we aren't seen, if we aren't validated by the group, we might be cast out of the tribe and left to die.
But the cost of operating in that modern survival mode is astronomical. It keeps your mind perpetually on edge. You are always playing defense.
Always reacting.
You're reacting to algorithms, to the applause or the criticism of the crowd, to the expectations of your boss or your peers. If you are always reacting, you never get to the contemplation Aristotle is talking about.
You never get to sit down and ask, wait, do I even want to be doing this?
Which brings Socrates into the picture. He famously declared, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But here's the catch. You physically cannot examine your life if you are constantly performing it for an audience.
If we look at the brain mechanics behind this battle between survival and contemplation, it is essentially a turf war inside your skull.
A turf war. I like that.
When you are caught in that endless cycle of scrolling, arguing, performing, and comparing, you are living almost entirely in your limbic system.
The limbic system. That's the lizard brain, right? The primitive part.
Broadly speaking, yes. The limbic system is the deeply emotional, highly reactive, survival-oriented part of the brain. It doesn't care about your 10-year goals or your moral philosophy.
It just wants you to survive the next 5 minutes.
Exactly. It only cares about immediate threats and immediate rewards. It's the part that urges you to fight, to flee, or to seek immediate tribal approval to ensure you aren't ostracized.
So the limbic system is the part of the brain that makes me type out a highly aggressive, emotionally charged reply to a work email at 11:30 at night when I know I should just go to sleep.
Precisely. It demands immediate reaction. But Aristotle's concept of the power of contemplation, that lives in a completely different neighborhood of the brain. It lives in the prefrontal cortex.
The executive center.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the advanced, logical, visionary CEO part of your brain. The prefrontal cortex thrives on clarity, deliberate thought, and long-term strategic planning.
But it gets overpowered easily, doesn't it?
That is the vulnerability. The prefrontal cortex is easily overpowered by the limbic system when you are stressed or overstimulated. The prefrontal cortex absolutely needs silence to function optimally.
So silence acts as a hard reset button.
It starves the limbic system of the constant stimuli it needs to stay frantic, allowing the noise to quiet down so your actual strategic mind, your prefrontal cortex, can take the wheel.
And this ties directly into the concept of true self-mastery, true control. We tend to think of power as exerting force over others, but Aristotle had a different take. He said, "What lies in our power to do lies in our power not to do."
That is profound.
Control isn't about how loudly you can yell, or how many followers you can influence, or how quickly you can fire back a witty retort. True control is the power of the pause. It's choosing not to react.
It's the ultimate display of internal strength. When your limbic system is absolutely screaming at you to perform, to defend your ego, to jump into the fray, and your prefrontal cortex is strong enough to step in calmly and say, no, we don't need to engage with this.
That is the essence of self-mastery.
The sources we're reviewing use two incredibly vivid examples to illustrate this kind of ultimate quiet presence. And I want to spend some time on them because they paint such a clear picture.
Yeah, let's get into those.
So think about a lion hunting in the wild. A lion is the apex predator, but a lion does not announce its presence.
It's not roaring while it's sneaking up on a gazelle.
Exactly. It doesn't roar constantly to let everyone know how dangerous it is. It doesn't need to prove its status to the jungle. When it is time to act, it stalks its prey in patient, focused, absolutely lethal silence.
Its silence isn't an absence of action. It is an intensely focused, terrifying presence.
The contrast there is key. The lesser animals make noise to seem bigger than they are. The truly powerful operate in quiet certainty.
And the second example brings it into the human realm perfectly. A master surgeon in an operating room.
Right.
If you've ever been in a high-stakes environment, the true experts are never the loudest people in the room. Surgeons performing a complex bypass don't yell, they don't throw scalpels around to show everyone how important and stressed they are.
Every single gesture is precise, deliberate, and quiet.
Their silence is immersive. It's the highest form of discipline. They don't need applause from the nurses while they are cutting. They don't need a live stream audience.
The reward is the successful outcome, built entirely on quiet, relentless focus.
That image of the surgeon working in quiet precision is the perfect metaphor for how we should be operating in our own lives when we are trying to build something of value.
Which brings us to a massive psychological hurdle, the biology of identity, and why we so often fail to be like that quiet surgeon.
Because the opposite of that quiet surgeon is the person who tells everyone at the dinner party what they are going to do before they ever pick up a scalpel.
We see this all the time.
And we are all guilty of this. It brings us to the dopamine trap of the premature announcement.
It is arguably one of the most pervasive traps in the modern self-improvement movement. The moment you decide to make a positive change in your life, the overwhelming, almost intoxicating urge is to broadcast it.
I'm getting in shape, I'm doing a triathlon, I'm finally writing that screenplay, I'm launching a startup.
We absolutely love the announcement. It feels so good to say it.
But Jung had a crucial and, frankly, cutting insight about this. He said, you are what you do, not what you say you'll do.
And he wasn't just dropping a catchy motivational quote. He was hitting on a fundamental, structural truth of human psychology.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I always thought sharing your goals was supposed to create accountability.
That's the common advice, yeah.
But the neuroscience actually explains exactly why announcing your goals often destroys your chances of ever achieving them. Wait, so you're telling me if I just text my friend that I'm going to write a book, my brain chemically reacts as if I've already written a chapter?
It really does.
That seems like a massive design flaw in human biology. How does that work?
It is a massive biological trap, and it has to do with how dopamine functions. We often misunderstand dopamine as the pleasure chemical. It's better understood as the motivation and reward chemical. It drives you to seek out things that are good for your survival and status. When you announce a grand goal to your friends, or you post it on social media, people naturally respond with encouragement.
They give you likes, they say, congratulations, you're going to do great.
I'm so proud of you for starting. When you receive that social validation, your brain releases a massive spike of dopamine. But here is the critical flaw. Your brain releases that dopamine reward as if you have already achieved the goal.
So my brain can't tell the difference between the praise for planning to run a marathon and the praise for actually crossing the finish line.
Exactly. To your limbic system, social validation is social validation. You have effectively tricked your nervous system into a false sense of accomplishment.
You've cashed the biochemical check before doing a single hour of the actual job.
And because your brain has already received the massive dopamine reward, your motivation to actually do the difficult, boring, painful daily work required to reach the goal plummets. Why would your brain expend intense effort to get a reward it feels it already has? You burn all your available motivational energy on the declaration itself.
Which brings us right back to Plato. He warned us about this thousands of years before we had fMRI machines or knew what dopamine was. He said, the beginning is the most important part of the work.
If you burn all your momentum, all your neurochemical drive on telling people about the beginning, you will never make it past the beginning.
You will become a professional starter. We all know people like this. They have a new world-changing project every 6 months. They talk about it endlessly for 3 weeks, and then it quietly disappears.
This is exactly why the philosophical synthesis we are discussing heavily advocates for building your identity in the dark, letting silence be the forge.
When you confuse talking with doing, you are building an identity based purely on perception.
You are crafting a narrative about who you are based on what other people think you are doing.
But an identity built on perception is incredibly fragile. When the initial applause fades, and it always fades quickly. If you haven't done the quiet, grueling work in the dark, you are left with no actual system, no underlying discipline, and no real momentum. You are just an empty shell of announcements.
So I want to challenge you, the listener, right now. Look honestly at your own life and your own ambitions. Are you building an identity based on perception? Or are you building it on performance?
True, lasting motivation, the kind that actually wires your brain for resilience and changes who you fundamentally are, doesn't come from external applause.
It comes from the dopamine hit of actual, undeniable, quiet progress.
It comes from the satisfaction of reading one more chapter when nobody on earth knows you're reading it. It comes from lacing up your shoes and running one more mile at 6 a.m. in the freezing cold when absolutely no one is watching, and you won't post a picture of it later.
That is when your brain actually wires itself for real toughness.
It requires a profound reprogramming of your reward system. It's about training your brain to seek the dopamine reward from the friction of the action itself, rather than from the cheap, fleeting reward of social recognition.
That shift from external validation to internal satisfaction is a monumental leap in human development.
But let's be totally honest here, making that shift is not easy. In fact, it's incredibly uncomfortable, which brings us to a really difficult part of this journey, the friction of true transformation.
Because we love the idea of transformation in movies. We love the cinematic training montage where the hero works hard to a catchy rock song for 2 minutes, sweats a bit, and suddenly they are a master martial artist or a brilliant CEO.
But real life doesn't have a montage.
Real transformation is stubborn. It is slow. It happens in the mundane, boring, repetitive daily systems when no one is cheering for you.
And beyond being boring, it actively forces you to face things you have spent your whole life trying to ignore. Jung comes back into the conversation here with a quote that is as terrifying as it is clinically true. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate."
That quote hits like a freight train.
You will call it fate. I mean, how often do we do exactly that? We blame the universe, we blame our terrible boss, we blame the economy, we blame our exes, we blame our bad luck.
When really it's our own deeply ingrained, unprocessed, unconscious behavioral patterns running the show on autopilot.
But if I can push back for a second, isn't fate just the stuff out of our control? Why does Jung place the blame back on our unconscious?
Because the vast majority of the choices that lead to your current circumstances were made by your unconscious programming. Your implicit biases, your childhood traumas, your unexamined fears of failure or success.
These invisible forces dictate who you marry, what jobs you quit, and how you react to stress.
Exactly. Until you drag those hidden forces out into the light of conscious awareness, they will dictate your trajectory, and you will feel like a helpless victim of circumstance, of fate.
This raises an important question. Why is the silence required to face that unconscious programming so frightening for most people? Why do we run from it so consistently?
Because true silence is incredibly, brutally honest. It strips away the armor of distraction. It doesn't allow you to hide behind busyness.
When you finally turn off the podcast, shut down the screen, and just sit in a room by yourself, what immediately rushes in to fill that void are the exact discomforts you've been using the noise to numb.
Your deep-seated doubts, your lingering guilt over past mistakes, your insecurities about your worth.
The comforting lies you've been telling yourself for years that simply aren't true. Sitting in intentional silence means pulling up a chair and sitting directly across from all of those monsters.
It's a literal battleground inside your own head. And staying in that silence, refusing to grab your phone to distract yourself the second an uncomfortable memory surfaces, is an act of profound, raw courage.
But the friction isn't just internal. Even if you conquer your own demons in the quiet, there is another massive layer of friction waiting for you. Social friction.
Ah, yes, the environmental pushback.
Yeah.
This is the exact point where many people falter and give up on their transformation.
When you start doing this quiet internal work, your external actions inevitably begin to shift. You stop participating in the office gossip. You start waking up earlier so you can't stay out late.
You stop going to the bar every Friday just to complain about how unfair life is.
Your behaviors change drastically, but your environment and the people in it haven't changed at all. And that creates a massive point of friction with your friends, your family, and your coworkers.
Because your evolution disrupts their comfort zone. They have a fixed, comfortable image of who you are and where you fit in their hierarchy.
When you suddenly display new discipline, it challenges that image. And frankly, your new discipline acts as a mirror, reflecting their own lack of discipline back at them. It makes them uncomfortable.
It's often referred to as the crabs in a bucket mentality. When one crab tries to climb out, the others pull it back down. People closest to you might start questioning you, offering passive-aggressive comments, or telling you you've changed.
And it's crucial to understand that they rarely do this out of intentional malice. They do it out of their own unexamined discomfort.
Jung observed that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. By stepping into a newly disciplined, conscious version of yourself, you are forcing the people around you to reconsider who you are.
And unfortunately, it forces them to subconsciously reconsider who they are, too.
And it takes immense, almost superhuman strength to remain silent in the face of that confusion or mockery from the people you love. We are deeply social creatures. Our evolutionary biology screams at us to make sure our tribe understands and approves of our changes.
We desperately want to explain ourselves, but waiting for that approval or trying to negotiate your growth with people who aren't ready for it is a massive trap.
Which is where the Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius comes in to completely shut down the debate. He offered a piece of blunt, timeless instruction. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one.
It's so perfect. You don't need to hold a town hall meeting to explain your new standards to your friends. You don't need to draft a 10-point manifesto on why you are eating differently or working differently or setting new boundaries.
Just do it. Let the results speak.
When you stop needing permission to grow, and you stop waiting to be completely understood by everyone around you, you achieve a state that psychologists and philosophers alike revere. You become internally untouchable.
You develop a resilience that is rooted so deeply in your own self-respect and your own private actions, rather than being reactive to the fluctuating opinions of others.
You prove the reality of your growth, not by defending it in arguments, but by simply embodying it every single day.
Embodying it daily. That is the perfect pivot to our next major concept, systems over inspiration.
Because if we are going to embody this transformation, if we are going to be the quiet surgeon, we have to talk about how we actually build that reality day by mundane day.
This brings us to a concept that completely flips the modern self-help industry on its head. Goals are emotional and feelings fade. Systems, on the other hand, are built on cold, hard behavior.
There's a famous saying in high-performance psychology: you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
This is a critical pivot in how we understand human achievement. Inspiration is a wonderful, intoxicating spark, but it is a terrible, unreliable fuel source.
It burns incredibly hot, but it burns out entirely too quickly.
You might listen to this deep dive right now and feel an incredible surge of inspiration to change your entire life. But what happens on a random Tuesday morning in February, when it's raining, you slept terribly, your boss is angry, and that warm feeling of inspiration is completely, totally gone?
That is exactly when you need Aristotle. He famously observed, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit.
You do not become an excellent, disciplined person by having one excellent, disciplined thought.
You don't become it by setting a massive goal on New Year's Eve. You become it by building repetitive, often incredibly boring, daily habits that act as the scaffolding for the identity you are trying to forge.
Let's look at the deep neuroscience of that repetition, specifically concerning a phenomenon called cognitive dissonance. The human brain relies heavily on coherence. It needs your beliefs and your actions to match.
Let's say your stated identity, the goal you tell yourself, is I am a highly focused, disciplined person.
But your daily lived reality is that you hit snooze 4 times, you eat junk food, your workspace is chaotic, and you spend 3 hours doom scrolling.
Your prefrontal cortex acutely senses that massive contradiction. That gap between what you say you are and what your actions prove you are creates deep internal conflict. That is cognitive dissonance.
And that dissonance actively, chemically erodes your motivation and your self-esteem. Essentially, your brain calls your bluff.
It knows you're lying to yourself. You can't trick your own brain with positive affirmations if your actions are a mess.
Precisely. Affirmations without action are worse than useless. They are psychologically damaging because they increase the dissonance.
But if we reverse the equation, if your daily behaviors consistently, relentlessly match your stated goals, even in the absolute dark when no one is watching and there is no immediate reward, your brain recognizes the pattern.
It sees the sheer repetition and the undeniable commitment of your actions. Over time, the cognitive dissonance completely disappears, and your internal identity begins to stabilize and harden like concrete.
You don't just hope you are a disciplined person. You start to truly, fundamentally believe you are the person you're acting like, because the evidence is undeniable.
This makes so much sense of why the ancient Stoics placed such a heavy, almost obsessive emphasis on the link between physical training and mental fortitude.
Training your body for a Stoic like Seneca or Marcus Aurelius wasn't about vanity. It wasn't about looking good in a toga for the statues.
It was a highly practical, accessible tool for reshaping your fundamental relationship with effort and discomfort.
When you force yourself to endure voluntary physical discomfort, whether that's lifting heavy weights, running long distances, or taking a cold shower, you are quite literally training your mind to show up and do work without needing an immediate dopamine reward.
You are practicing the exact neurological endurance required to stick to a complex mental or professional system.
Physical discipline is the ultimate training ground for cognitive discipline. The brain doesn't completely compartmentalize effort.
When you learn to endure the burning friction in your lungs during a run for the sake of a long-term health goal, you are building the exact same neural pathways you need to endure the boredom and friction of writing a difficult report or biting your tongue during an argument.
It teaches you to depend on rhythm rather than fleeting motivation.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, right now in your actual life? It means translating this high-minded ancient philosophy into the gritty, mundane details of your daily routine.
Reclaiming control of your life means relying on rhythm. It means setting a wake-up time and adhering to it every single day, regardless of whether you feel inspired to get out of bed.
It means eating with biological purpose rather than emotional comfort. It means creating a hard, structural rule to resist the infinite scroll on your phone. Maybe the phone doesn't enter the bedroom, ever.
When you build a system of automated behaviors, you don't have to waste your precious, finite cognitive energy, your casino chips, deciding what to do every single morning. The system decides. You simply execute.
And the beauty of that approach is that through that quiet, relentless, rhythmic execution, the frantic urgency of modern life begins to fade.
You stop riding the exhausting emotional roller coaster of needing inspiration, and you settle into the quiet, unstoppable, steady momentum of consistency.
That consistency is the forge where true, lasting power is created.
And that quiet momentum leads us perfectly to the summit of this conversation, the final core concept we need to explore, the ultimate victory.
We've talked deeply about the brain chemistry, we've broken down the daily systems, and we've analyzed the internal and social friction.
But what is the actual end game here? What are we ultimately building toward with all this silence and discipline? We can bring it all together with the towering words of Plato. The first and best victory is to conquer self.
It is framed as the ultimate victory, precisely because it is the only domain in the entire universe over which you actually have absolute sovereign control.
You cannot control the global economy, you cannot control the opinions of your peers, you cannot control the social media algorithm, and you cannot control the unpredictable chaos of the future.
But you can, with immense effort, conquer your own reactions, your own emotional impulses, and the direction of your own attention.
And as our philosophical framework emphasizes repeatedly, this victory is won exclusively in the theater of silence, never in the spectacle of the crowd.
Which requires a massive fundamental shift in how we approach the concept of change itself. Socrates gives us the exact blueprint for this shift. He advised, focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new.
If you spend all your energy constantly fighting your old bad habits or fiercely arguing with the people who doubt you or misunderstand you, you are still trapped in a reactive state.
You are still letting them dictate the terms of engagement. They still own your attention. Building the new requires that quiet, forward-focused, utterly detached discipline.
If we connect this to the broader landscape of a successful life, silence ceases to be just an absence of noise. It becomes your most vital strategic asset.
It is the protective buffer zone that guards your cognitive bandwidth. High-level thinking, deep creativity, and profound identity formation require vast, uninterrupted expanses of mental space.
Every single time you feel compelled to defend your life choices to a skeptic or narrate your daily process for public consumption online, you are actively puncturing that buffer zone. You're letting the vital energy leak out into the void.
But when you fiercely protect that zone, when you keep your mouth shut and do the work, A profound neurochemical shift happens in what you actually crave.
You eventually stop craving the external recognition entirely. Your dopamine system undergoes a complete recalibration.
You no longer get a thrill from a like or a notification. In fact, they might start to feel like distractions. Instead, you get a deep, resonant thrill from the quiet win.
From looking at your desk at the end of the day and knowing you've finished the hard work you promised yourself you'd finish, you start to crave the silent, undeniable reality of progress over the cheap, noisy illusion of applause.
And that recalibration leads to a psychological state of deep coherence. Socrates captures this ultimate state of being perfectly. The greatest way to live with honor in this world is to be what we pretend to be.
When you reach this stage, there is no longer a gap between your public avatar and your private reality. You are exactly who you appear to be, down to your core.
Think about the people in your own life or figures in history that you truly deeply admire on a visceral level. Notice how they rarely, if ever, have to explain themselves to you.
They don't give you a play-by-play of their daily routine to prove they are working hard. They don't post essays defending their character.
They simply possess that deep coherence. They aren't fragmented. They aren't constantly performing for an audience because they aren't looking for the audience to validate them.
They have chosen silence not because they are hiding from the world, but as a form of the highest personal refinement. Their ultimate reward isn't public adoration. It is a profound, unshakable internal peace and a crystal clear mind.
They have achieved a state where they find total, absolute validation internally. The world's opinion of them becomes entirely secondary. It is merely a byproduct of their unyielding consistency rather than the goal of their actions.
And that brings us to the culmination of what we've unpacked today. Let's do a quick recap of the massive ground we've covered in this deep dive.
We've taken the combined, timeless wisdom of Plato, Aristotle, and Carl Jung, and we've grounded it firmly in the reality of modern neuroscience.
We've seen clearly that intentional silence is not a weakness, an awkward gap, or a void. It is a highly active, biologically necessary strategy.
It is the specific environment where you reclaim your depleted neurotransmitters. It is the forge where you align your daily actions with your true internal identity, overriding the dopamine traps of the modern world.
And it is the quiet space where you build the stubborn, repetitive daily habits that ultimately make you internally untouchable. Remember, you don't rise to your grandest goals. You fall to the level of your systems, and those systems are built, tested, and solidified in the quiet dark.
It is a complete radical paradigm shift away from the exhausting modern mandate to be constantly visible and constantly vocal, and a return to the ancient, proven wisdom of being quietly, undeniably formidable.
Absolutely formidable. But before we wrap up and let you get back to your day, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. We spent this entire deep dive building a bulletproof case for the absolute supremacy of inner silence and total internal validation.
We've established that true self-mastery requires us to stop explaining ourselves, to stop seeking applause, and to stop needing the world to understand our internal mechanics.
But let's push that philosophy to its absolute logical extreme for a moment. If you successfully become a person who never needs to justify, narrate, or share your inner world with anyone else, how does that change our fundamental biological human need for deep connection?
If you build a fortress of inner silence that is so strong, so self-sufficient, that it doesn't need a single external brick of validation from another human being, do you run the risk of isolating yourself from the very people who might actually be capable of understanding you on a profound level?
Is there a tipping point where the ultimate victory of conquering the self and building that perfect fortress of inner silence slowly transforms into a self-imposed solitary confinement? It's a massive tension between total self-sufficiency and deep human connection, and it is a paradox that doesn't have an easy bumper sticker answer.
It truly is the ultimate paradox of striving to be a perfectly strong individual while still being fundamentally wired as a social species. Finding where the fortress ends and the bridge begins is the work of a lifetime.
Something heavy and real for you to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us and taking this deep dive with us today. We highly encourage you to find just a few minutes of total, uninterrupted, uncomfortable silence today. Turn off the music, put the phone in another room, not to empty your mind, but to finally give yourself the space to truly listen to it. Until next time.